Experts claim that even if greenhouse gas emissions were to stop tomorrow, extremely dangerous sea level rise would still occur and be absolutely guaranteed to continue for decades or millennia. One of the most serious effects of a warming climate that is already being felt is rising seas. Around the globe, the mean sea level has already increased by 16 centimeters to 21 centimeters, 6 to 8 inches, since the 1880s. Over the previous 3 decades, that increase was half as great. In the most recent decade, 2013 to 22, the ocean rose more than twice as quickly, 4.62 millimeters a year, as it did in the first decade of satellite data, 1993 to 2002, when the rate was 2.77 millimeters a year. According to the World Meteorological Organization, last year set a new record. The fact that the last 8 years have been the warmest on record is not a coincidence. The figures might appear modest. Even 4.62 millimeters a year is only half a centimeter. So why did UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres warn that a mass exodus of entire populations on a biblical scale is imminent due to the acceleration of sea level rise in February? The fact that sea levels would continue to rise even if greenhouse gas emissions were stopped immediately, which they won't, is part of the issue. It's too late to stop the ocean from rising, even in the best-case scenario. Outside of the scientific community, the explanation for this is not well recognized, but it is significant. The processes that raise sea levels, notably the ocean's thermal expansion and the melting of glaciers and ice sheets as a result of global warming, have a centuries-long lag. According to Professor Jonathan Bamber, director of the University of Bristol's Bristol Glaciology Centre, the atmosphere changes quite rapidly, but deep ocean circulation takes centuries. It takes generations for the heat to travel around and for a new balance to be reached as it sinks into the deep ocean. Ice sheets also have a response period, so if the temperature is changed tomorrow, it might take hundreds or even thousands of years for the system to stabilize. If you add everything up, it will take many millennia to attain equilibrium at the new temperature that we've created. According to Bamber, returning to temperatures from before industrialization is the only way to reverse the sea level rise that has accelerated over the past century. However, all nations with significant coastal populations will be at risk under any scenario of a rise in temperature, including Bangladesh, China, India, and the Netherlands. Megacities on every continent, including Lagos, Bangkok, Mumbai, Shanghai, London, Buenos Aires, and New York, will have significant effects. Of course, there are many more risks associated with the climate issue, including sweltering heat waves, droughts, floods, and other extreme weather conditions. A rising ocean does, however, have a vaguely apocalyptic air to it. The issue with sea level rise, according to Bamber, is that it is unavoidable. There are no exceptions. If the Earth warms, sea level will rise. Ice melts as the oceans warm up. Global warming is a foregone conclusion. As a barrier against global warming, the ocean has so far been. 90% of the energy trapped in the climate system by greenhouse gases is lost as heat to the ocean, which keeps the world colder than it otherwise would be but endangers marine life. A marine heatwave affected more than half of the ocean surface last year, 58%, despite the fact that the world has been having a colder time recently, known as La Niña conditions. However, the sea is rising for many reasons, including the heat. The other components of sea level rise between 1971 and 2018 were glacier melt, 22%, ice sheet melt, 20%, and changes in terrestrial water storage. Thermal expansion accounted for nearly 50% of the sea level rise during this time. Since the ocean does not rise uniformly at the same rate, unlike in a bath, it is difficult to predict the impact. Because Earth is not a perfect sphere, for one thing, and because ocean currents affect temperature, there are variations in temperature around the globe. Storm surges and tidal variation, as seen during Hurricane Sandy in New York,
a natural waterway created by Superstorm Sandy could soon close,
and Cyclone Idai in Mozambique, amplify the effects of sea level rise. We do, however, know that coastal towns around the world, particularly heavily populated, low-lying urban centers, would be the first to be affected by rising seas. It poses an existential threat to nations like Tuvalu and other small island developing states and major cities worldwide. but it's also difficult to forecast the behavior of populations that are at risk. Despite being at risk from sea level rise due to having one of the lowest elevations in the world, the Netherlands has gone to tremendous efforts to erect defences to keep itself safe. Professor Gerd Masselink, an expert in coastal geomorphology at the University of Plymouth, says a headline that claims, for instance, that more than a quarter of the Netherlands would be flooded by 2100 sounds quite dramatic. However, right now, people in the Netherlands are cycling and walking on land. There are defences in place for the coastline, and if you say that 200 million people will be impacted by the rising sea level, well, anybody who lives on the coast is affected in some manner, but it doesn't exactly mean that they're going to lose their house right away. So how terrible could things really get? Again, it's difficult to predict precisely, but the IPCC has made an effort to model various scenarios for how much sea levels would rise by 2100, depending on how well mankind succeeds in addressing the climate catastrophe. Each scenario is the result of intricate calculations, referred to as shared socio-economic pathways, or SSPs, which are represented as a number that account for likely emissions, as well as potential socio-economic changes like population, urban density, education, land use, and wealth, which also affect the use of fossil fuels. The global mean sea level is expected to increase by 0.28 to 0.55 meters over the course of the next century, assuming that the world moves toward a more sustainable future, adheres to development goals, and reaches the Paris climate objective of lowering global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2050. Sea levels are expected to increase by 0.32 to 0.62 meters by the end of the century, presuming that socio-economic and technological trends do not significantly change. Inequality will continue, but if we can fulfill the low emissions target, SSP 1 to 2.6, we can limit global warming to 1.8 degrees Celsius. This scenario suggests a revived nationalism that places environmental issues at a low international priority as states pursue development above sustainability. It is an intermediate greenhouse gas emission scenario, SSP 2 to 4.5, where net zero is not attained by 2100. An extremely high emission scenario, SSP 3 to 7, where CO2 doubles from current levels to 2100 is caused by highly unequal investments in human capital, rising inequality between and within countries, and increased coal investment. Exploiting fossil fuel resources to support energy-intensive lifestyles worldwide goes hand in hand with social and economic progress. In addition, the IPCC issues a low-likelihood high-impact scenario, SSP 5 to 8.5, in which the instability of the ice sheets causes sea levels to rise by more than 2 meters by the end of this century. According to Bamber, the worst case we're looking at is something like more than 2 meters in a century. To put it into perspective, a sea level rise of 2 meters would result in the yearly displacement, impact, or flooding of 790 million people, or almost a tenth of the world's population. By 2050, there will likely be 1 billion people living in the low-elevation coastal zone, up from 896 million in 2020. It's crucial to keep in mind that in each of these scenarios, sea levels will continue to rise well past 2100. The IPCC has only provided an immediate threat assessment for where the planet might be by the end of this century using these estimations. Likewise, the various emission scenarios really have a negligibly modest impact on sea level rise in the short term, but they diverge considerably in the long future. Global mean sea level will increase by roughly 2 to 3 meters over the next 200 years if warming is kept to 1.5 degrees Celsius, but it might treble to 2 to 6 meters if warming is kept to even a slightly higher figure of 2 degrees Celsius. The West Antarctic and Greenland ice sheets will be permanently lost at sustained warming levels of 2 to 3 degrees Celsius. Under extreme warming, the end-of-century collapse of large Antarctic ice shelves, followed by an increase in ice flow, could cause a disastrous sea level rise by 2300 of 9 to 15 meters. And if global warming increases to 5 degrees Celsius, the Earth might experience a sea level rise of 19 to 22 meters, erasing entire cities and nations by the year 2300. The gap between our current acts and their long-term effects, according to Masselink, is what strikes him most about the impact of global warming. What I've always found remarkable is that, while the difference between no more greenhouse gas emissions and keep burning is significant, it is not going to make that big an impact in the next few decades, he claims. Not for us, but for our children's children, where it's going to make a significant difference. The thing that is challenging to comprehend is that scientists are still improving their sea level change models in the interim. They also make the point that the degree to which nations cooperate to reduce the production of more greenhouse gases may significantly affect how quickly and how much sea levels rise. As Albert Einstein once said, the world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything. You can suggest topics you want to see next in the comment section below. Please subscribe to Weather Collapse if you want to know more, and be updated on the latest news about natural calamities or disasters happening all over the world, and don't forget to like today's video. We'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.